10 of you gave me a donation to tell me what to dye, and here's how they turned out. After each person told me about the colors they were thinking, I made an inspiration board with colors and images. Tiger and Bella is a colorway inspired by cats. This is at Yarn Distracted on Instagram. I wanted there to be very strong black areas in the yarn and some areas that were not dyed at all, so I gave a little experiment a shot. I tied the skeins of yarn basically in knots and then put them in the pot with the black dye. Once the black dye was exhausted, I took the yarn out of the pot and let it cool down a bit so that I could untie it without scalding my fingers. I found the right orangey colors to use to make Tiger and Bella into beautiful skeins of yarn, and then I to work filling in the spaces that were undyed on the yarn. I started out with the more tan sandy color to fill in the white spaces, and then where there was more gray I used the more, it was basically like a red-headed color. After flipping them over, I did the same thing on the other side. These turned out so cute, and it makes me want to dye more yarn inspired by my own kitties. Next up is Lauren, who said she wanted some rusty red, orange, brown yarn, which I was happy to oblige because honestly, why don't I already have something like this in my shop? So I found the right colors and I'm wringing out the yarn. I've got a bucket of hot water filled up, and I also always have, so like when I'm filling up the bucket of hot water, there's cold water in the hose first, so I always just discharge that into a second bucket, and then I use that bucket to rinse my hands off, so I'm not wasting that water and I'm not running back and forth to the sink all the time. I started applying the dye. I started with the orangey color and then I did the red color. So I wanted these to have distinct areas that were like more red and then more orange. So it's more of a tonal color than a semi-solid. But I wanted them to also be mixed together, not be so like color blocky. So that's why I'm doing it this way. After the dye set, I reoriented the skeins by moving the zip tie to a different place. That just makes a different point on the skein on the top and the bottom. After I poured on the brown dye, I twisted them up because while I did want some spots to be more brown than others, I didn't want the brown to completely overpower everything. That way the twisted parts on the inside will remain the color that they were. For real though, I think this may be a keeper for the shop. Next up is Roz, who wanted dark forest green with black speckles. So I already knew what colors I wanted to use, so I just got on with measuring them out. So I wanted there to be more black sections and more green sections in the yarn. I couldn't have everything be super saturated because then there would be no place for speckles to shine through. So if I'm kind of pouring the dye on, it will naturally make it so that there are more concentrated spaces and more space that doesn't have as much dye on it. By making spaces that are more black and more green, I think it will add depth to the colorway as a whole. So once everything's set after being in the oven for a few hours, I reoriented the skeins and really pulled up the parts of the yarn that had the least amount of dye on them. And I got some speckling in. I did black, a dark green, and then a neon green, which seems like it might not be the choice that you should make, but I think if you're just going to add dark onto dark, it's just going to disappear. So most of the neon green is going to fade into the very dark colors that are already on the yarn, and the ones that do manage to shine through will just add a little bit of depth and complexity to the colorway. It turned out so nice. It's really moody, and I think it would make a really classic garment with some interest in it. Callie said she wanted dark blue-black yarn mixed with a gray steel blue with red-orange and pear green speckles, and she wanted the whole thing to be moody speckles. The thing about speckles is that a lot of things are out of your control. You can control how much water is in the pan, how hot your yarn is, and you can know up front how the dye breaks into its individual colors. But at the end of the day, once you put it on the yarn, it's sort of up to however it wants to dye that day. Before I got started, I made sure to put this yarn in the oven to get it nice and hot so that the speckles would strike. If you don't do that and your water is cold, it's basically going to float around and it may make contact with the yarn and soak in, it may not. It just generally ends up a big muddy mess. You can't particularly control depth of shade. You have to do a trade-off between having a nice crisp speckle and it just being really a dark color, like as dark as that dye gets. Of course, you can dilute a certain dye, like really pale or really dark, but not when you're speckling. I got speckles on the top, the bottom, and the inside of the yarn using the inspiration photos as guidance, especially the one that Kelly said she liked the best. This definitely turned out really moody and I like it. I can't wait to see it knit up. Nicole's colorway is inspired by kelp forests, blue turquoise, and yellow browns. So I had a little bit of work to do to figure out exactly what colors to use. I was pretty sure on the blue and the orange, but I wanted to make sure on the turquoise and the yellow brown. I had several ideas, but I needed to make sure I found the right shade. So we got the yarn in the pan and I put a little bit of water in it just to make sure that it wasn't going in dry. And what I figured I would do was basically a gradient from blue through to that browny orange. So I started with that deep, deep blue on one side, and then I filled in the other side with that nice orange. And then I filled in the middle parts with the more tan color, and then that vibrant turquoise. I left a little bit of space between the colors so it didn't get muddy while I was shifting it around, moving it back and forth from the oven. After it's set, I flipped everybody over and did the same thing. I kept it simple. I didn't do any speckles. I just really love how ethereal this is, and it really does look like the kelp forest pictures. This is really cool. I would want to find a way to make it do some color pooling so you could really get those vibrant colors isolated. Ong's colorway is a warm neutral, light pops of speckles that are rust, mossy greens, and chocolate brown. When she gave me that description, I already knew exactly what I wanted to do. I just made sure I found the right tone to get that like French vanilla background, and then I was off and away. After I got that nice light background color on there, I dumped all the water out and I twisted up the skein so that the speckles would only hit a certain portion of the yarn. If you leave the yarn too spread out, you're gonna have too many speckles, and that's not the look that Ong was going for. She sent me several examples of the density of speckles that she was thinking. So I added a little bit more water and some citric acid to make sure the speckles hit where they were supposed to and stayed there. And it was just a matter of putting the speckles on. Really nice brown, green, and a rusty color. And I cleaned up that little blob at the end so it didn't soak in and make a weird smudgy area. This is a really nice, super classic colorway. I think it would knit up as like a really almost tweedy, just gentle colorway. I love it. Margot is 7 years old. She said she wanted purple with pink speckles and inspired by Mommy Longlegs. And also I was shown 2 pastel pink and purple markers as inspiration. So I set to work finding the correct pink, the correct purple, because you know you have to have the right tone or else it just is not right. Once I settled on the correct tones of pink and purple, I set to work. It's a nice pale colorway, so I got them in there, sort of mixing together, sort of having their own space, generally just being like an ethereal, cloudy, sunset-y situation. So after it set in the oven, I flipped it over and did the other side. And you'll see how differently the color goes on when it's cold versus after it's set in the oven. Like there goes on the purple. That's not too terribly different, but watch the pink. It goes on like orange. And then it sets and it becomes the correct pink. There it is. So Margot didn't say anything about blue, but in the inspiration photos of Mommy Longlegs, there is a lot of blue. So I put some patches just to kind of mix in there. I didn't use all of it. I didn't want it to overpower the pink and purple. But if we were going to be authentic to Mommy Longlegs, there needed to be some blue. So I poured off most of the water and I twisted everything up and scrunched it up. And I found some reddish pinky color and kind of a berry pinky color, and then also a fuchsia-y color to sort of bring the purple back in. Put those speckles on top, and there she is. So cute. so creepy. If you don't know what mommy long legs is, you probably don't have children. It is what it is. Julie wanted cerulean blues in various shades with specks of orange. So obviously my first task was to find the correct blues. And that was easy enough, and I knew exactly which oranges I wanted to use. So I got the yarn in the pan, I got a darker blue in there and then a more vibrant blue, and they're mixing together, and I didn't jostle it around too much because I really wanted there to be the more saturated spaces and the less saturated spaces, but still having the colors mixed together. And that's why I didn't add more blue. You see how there's some undyed spaces. I wanted that to be there so that the light blue tones were represented. So I poured out a lot of the water. I left it a bit more spread out because I wanted the oranges to be speckles but be a little bit more integrated into the colorway and not just be super tiny little dots. It's so pretty. I especially love that lantern in the bottom right hand. That's such a pretty image, and I hope the yarn looks like that. Kim sent me this photo up top of a moody, foggy pine forest, and when I saw it, I already knew what I wanted to do. That was easy peasy in my mind. So what I basically wanted to do was kind of make a painting of that photo on the yarn. So I started at the bottom with a really deep brown, and then the next space was a really deep green for the pine trees, and then the top was a really pale, icy, steely blue gray for the sky up there, and I think I nailed it. After it's set, I flipped it over and did the exact same thing. And once that was set, I just tried to find some spots in the bottom that didn't have as much dye in it, and I poured off the excess water, and then I took those colors of those really, really vibrant oranges and yellows and greens, and I put them in the spaces that didn't have such really deep colors on them. I couldn't do it down in the brown and green area as much because they were so dark already, but I love it. It's such a mood. This is snow melt season, and that's like personified in this yarn. Dara wanted Neapolitan ice cream. This was something very cute. And since I had already put in the work to find all of the different shades of pink that I have, I already could tell which one would be the best for the strawberry part. I got that in there. It was a bit tricky trying to make it be super even but not spread all over the place, but I think we got it done. And then I got a nice chocolatey brown. If you look at chocolate ice cream, it's actually not very dark. It's quite a light color, especially if you like all of the inspiration photos that I used. The brown is pretty light, so you had to use an easy hand. Don't go too crazy. So again, I just flipped it over and did the same on the other side. I kept this one really simple. I was considering doing speckles in the pink and brown sections, but in all of my extensive ice cream research I did, there weren't any Neapolitan ice creams that had like strawberry chunks or chocolate chips inside of it. So I just kept it as simple as possible. This is Neapolitan ice cream. You could put this in a bowl and people will be like, oh my god, ice cream. But it's yarn. Guys, don't eat it, okay? You might want to though. I want to. I'm hungry. So this was fun. It's really fun to get to dye stuff that I probably normally wouldn't. So these skeins will be going up in the shop probably next month in May. I have a whole bunch more of this base to dye. This base was discontinued because the mill that makes it closed. So there will be an announcement when the shop update is happening, but for now, I hope you really enjoyed watching me dye these 10 colorways that 10 of you came up with for me. Let me know if you like dyeing videos because it's pretty fun to do. So I'll see you next time. Bye!